Jesus, I surrender all to Him. I freely give. I will ever love and trust Him, in His presence daily live.
The 8th of December 1902, Volume 4. The confessor uses the authority of the Church to keep Jesus crucified in Louisa and to crucify her with him, so as to prevent the law of divorce. This morning, my adorable Jesus came and told me, "My daughter, today I want to keep you suspended without letting you suffer." I began to fear and to lament to him, and he added, "Do not fear, I will be with you. Rather, when you occupy the state of victim, you are exposed to justice, and in addition to the other sufferings, many times you have to suffer my very privation and obscurity. In sum, everything that man deserves because of his sins. But as I suspend your office of victim, everything I will show toward you will be mercy and love." I felt released from my state, even though I could see my beloved Jesus, and I understood very well that it was not his coming that rendered the coming of the confessor necessary to make me come round, but rather the sufferings that Jesus would send me. So I am unable to say why my soul felt a pain, while my nature felt great satisfaction, saying, "If nothing else, I will spare the confessor the sacrifice of having to come." But while I was thinking of this, I saw a priest clothed in white together with our Lord. It seemed to me that he was the Pope, and the confessor was with him. They were praying him, Jesus, to make me suffer so as to prevent the formation of this law of divorce, but Jesus would not pay attention to them. So the confessor, heedless of the fact that he was not being given audience, with extraordinary impetus, to the point that it seemed it was not him, took Jesus Christ in his arms and by force cast him inside of me, saying, "You will remain crucified within her, crucifying her, but this law of divorce we do not want." Jesus remained as though bound inside of me, crucified by such command, and I felt bitterly the pains of the cross. Then he said, "Daughter, it is the Church that wants it, and her authority, united to the power of prayer, binds me." End of the reading. The 8th of December 1922, Volume 15, on the Immaculate Conception. I write to obey, and I offer everything to my sweet Jesus, uniting myself to the sacrifice of his obedience in order to obtain the grace and the strength to do it as he wants. And now, O my Jesus, give me your holy hand and the light of your intelligence, and write together with me. I was thinking about the great portent of the Immaculate Conception of my Queen and Celestial Mama, and in my interior I heard him say, "My daughter, the Immaculate Conception of my beloved Mama was prodigious and all marvellous, so much so that heaven and earth were astonished and made feast. All three divine persons competed among themselves. The Father poured out an immense sea of power. I, the Son, poured out an infinite sea of wisdom, and the Holy Spirit an immense sea of eternal love, which merging into one formed one single sea. And in the middle of this sea, the conception of this Virgin was formed, chosen among the chosen. So the divinity administered the substance of this conception, and this sea was not only the centre of life of this admirable and singular creature, but it remained around her. not only to keep her defended from anything which might shadow her, but to give her in every instant new beauties, new graces, power, wisdom, love, privileges, etc. So her little nature was conceived in the centre of this sea, and was formed and grew under the influence of these divine waves. So much so that as soon as this noble and singular creature was formed, the divinity did not want to wait, as it usually does with other creatures. It wanted her embraces, the return of her love, her kisses, and to enjoy her innocent smiles. Therefore, as soon as her conception was formed, I gave her the use of reason. I endowed her with all sciences. I made her aware of our joys and our sorrows with regard to creation. Even from the maternal womb she would come to heaven at the foot of our throne to give us her embraces, the return of her love, her tender kisses. And throwing herself into our arms, she would smile at us with such delight of gratitude and thanksgiving as to snatch our smiles. Oh, how beautiful it was to see this innocent and privileged creature, enriched with all the divine qualities, coming into our midst, all love, all trust, without fear. In fact, sin alone is what puts distance between creator and creature, breaking love, dissolving trust, and striking fear. So she would come into our midst as queen, who with her love given by us would dominate us, enrapture us, put us in feast, and capture yet more love. And we would let her do it, enjoying the love that enraptured us, and constituting her queen of heaven and earth. Heaven and earth exulted and made feast together with us, having their queen after so many centuries. The sun smiled in its light and considered itself fortunate in having to serve its queen by giving her light. The heavens, the stars, and the whole universe smiled with joy and made feast, because they were to delight their queen, showing her the harmony of the spheres and of their beauty. The plants smiled, which were to nourish their queen, and the earth too smiled and felt ennobled in having to provide the residence for its empress and to be trodden by her steps. Only hell cried and felt itself losing strength because of the dominion of this sovereign lady. But do you know what was the first act which this celestial creature did when she found herself before our throne for the first time? She recognized that all the evil of man had been the split between his will and that of his Creator. She trembled, and with no delay, she bound her will to the foot of my throne, without even wanting to know it. And my will bound itself to her, and constituted itself the centre of her life, so much so that all currents or relations or communications opened between her and us, and there was no secret which we did not entrust to her. This indeed was the most beautiful, the greatest, the most heroic act she did, to lay down her will at our feet, an act which made us, as though enraptured, constitute her queen of all. Do you see then what it means to bind oneself to my will and to not know one's own? The second act was to offer herself for any sacrifice for love of us. The third, to render us the honour and the glory of the whole creation, which man had taken away from us by doing his own will. And even from the maternal womb she cried for love of us in seeing us offended, and she cried with sorrow over guilty man. Oh, these innocent tears moved us and hastened the longed-for redemption. This queen dominated us, bound us, and snatched infinite graces from us, She made us incline so much toward mankind that we could not resist, nor did we know how to resist her repeated petitions. But whence came to her so much power and so much influence over the very divinity? Ah, you have understood. It was the power of our will acting in her, which while dominating her, rendered her dominator of God himself. And besides, how could we resist so innocent a creature, possessed by the power and sanctity of our will? It would be as though resisting ourselves. We could see our divine qualities in her, the reflections of our sanctity, the reflections of the divine ways, of our love, of our power, etc., poured over her like waves, as well as our will, which was her centre, drawing all the reflections of our divine qualities, and making itself crown and defence of the divinity dwelling within her. If this Immaculate Virgin had not had the divine will as centre of life, all the other prerogatives and privileges with which we so enriched her would have been in comparison an absolute nothing. This is what confirmed and preserved for her so many privileges. Even more, it multiplied new ones in every instant. Here then is the reason why we constituted her Queen of all, because when we operate, we do it with reason, wisdom and justice. She never gave life to her human will, but our will was always intact in her. How could we say to another creature, "You are queen of the heavens, of the sun, of the stars, etc., if instead of having our will as dominion, she were dominated by her human will? All of the elements, the heavens, the sun, the earth, would have withdrawn from the regime and dominion of this creature. All would have cried out in their mute language, "We do not want her. We are superior to her, because we have never withdrawn from your eternal volition. As you created us, so we are." So would the sun have cried out with its light, the stars with their glittering, the sea with its waves, and everything else. On the contrary, as soon as they all felt the dominion of this excelling Virgin, who almost as their sister never wanted to know her own will but only that of God, not only did they make feast, but they felt honoured to have their queen. They ran around her to form her cortege and to pay obsequies to her. The moon by placing itself as footstool at her feet, the stars as crown, the sun as diadem, the angels as servants, and men as though in waiting. Everyone paid her honour and rendered their obsequies to her. There is no honour and glory which cannot be given to our will, whether acting within us in its own centre or dwelling in the creature. But do you know what was the first act which this noble queen did when, coming out of the maternal womb, she opened her eyes to the light of this low world? As she was born, the angels sang lullabies to the celestial baby, and she remained enraptured. Her beautiful soul went out of her little body, accompanied by angelic cohorts, and went around heaven and earth, gathering all the love that God had spread throughout the whole creation. And penetrating into heaven, she came to the foot of our throne, offered us the return of the love of all creation, and pronounced her first thank you in the name of all. Oh, how happy we felt in hearing the thank you of this little baby queen. And we confirmed in her all graces, all gifts, such as to make her surpass all other creatures together. Then throwing herself into our arms, she delighted with us, swimming in the sea of all contentments, being embellished with new beauty, with new light and with new love. She pleaded once again for mankind, praying us in tears to let the eternal Word descend in order to save her brothers. But as she was doing this, our will let her know that she should descend to the earth, and immediately she left our contentments and joys and departed, in order to do what? Our will. What powerful magnet our will was, dwelling on earth in this newborn Queen. No longer did the earth appear alien to us. We no longer felt like striking it, making use of our justice. We had the power of our will, which in this innocent child blocked our arms, smiled at us from the earth, and turned justice into graces and sweet smile. So much so that, unable to resist this sweet enchantment, the eternal Word hastened his course. O prodigy of my divine will, to you everything is due, through you everything is accomplished, and there is no greater prodigy than my will dwelling in the creature. End of the reading.
Ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae.
The 8th of December 1923, Volume 16. The Immaculate Conception of the Most Holy Virgin. To be able to conceive the Son of God, she was conceived eternally in the life and in the works, in the sufferings and in the merits of the incarnate Word. I was thinking about the Immaculate Conception of my Queen Mama, and after I received Holy Communion, my always adorable Jesus made himself seen in my interior, as though inside a room filled with light. In this light he was showing all he did during the course of his life. One could see lined up in order all his merits, his works, his pains, his wounds, his blood, and all that the life of a man-God contained, as though in the act of protecting a soul, very, very dear to him, from the slightest evil that could possibly shadow her. I was stupefied in seeing so much attention from Jesus, and he said to me, "My little newborn, I want to make known the Immaculate Conception of the Virgin, conceived without sin. First, you must know that my divinity is one single act. All its acts concentrate into a single one. This is what it means to be God, the greatest portent of our divine essence, not to be subject to succession of acts. And if to the creature it seems that we now do something and now something else, it is rather that we allow her to know what is within that single act. And since the creature is incapable of knowing it all at once, we allow her to know it little by little. Now everything that I, Eternal Word, was to do in my assumed humanity formed one act with that single act contained in my divinity. Therefore, before this noble creature was conceived, everything that the Eternal Word was to do upon earth already existed, and so, in the act of the conception of this Virgin, all my merits, my pains, my blood, and all that the life of a man-God contained lined up around her conception. She was conceived in the interminable abysses of my merits, of my divine blood, and in the immense sea of my sufferings. By virtue of them she remained immaculate, beautiful, and pure. Since my incalculable merits barred the way to the enemy, he could do no harm to her. It is fair that the one who was to conceive the Son of a God had to first be conceived in the works of this God, to be able to have the virtue of conceiving that Word who was to come to redeem humankind. Therefore first she was conceived in me, and then I was conceived in her. There was nothing left but to make it known to the creatures at the appropriate time, although in the divinity it was already done. Therefore the one who most gathered the fruits of redemption, or rather who received its complete fruit, was this excelling creature. Having been conceived in it, she loved, esteemed, and kept as her own everything that the Son of God did upon earth. Oh, the beauty of this tender little one! She was a prodigy of grace, a portent of our divinity. She grew up as our own daughter. She was our decorum, our joy, our honour, and our glory. While Jesus was saying this, I was thinking in my mind, it is true that the Queen Mama was conceived in the interminable merits of my Jesus, but her blood, her body were conceived in the womb of Saint Anne, who was not exempt from original sin. So how can it be that she inherited nothing of the many evils which we all have inherited from the sin of our first father Adam? And Jesus, my daughter, you have not yet understood that all the evil is in the will. It was the will that crushed man, that is, his nature, not nature that crushed the will of man. Nature remained in its place, just as it was created by me. Nothing changed. It was his will that changed, and put itself against nothing less than a divine will. This rebellious will crushed his nature, debilitating it, contaminating it, and rendering it slave to most vile passions. It happened as to a container full of fragrances or precious objects. If it is emptied and then filled with rottenness or vile things, does the container perhaps change? The content has changed, but the container is always the same. At the most, it becomes more or less estimable, depending on what it contains. Such was man. Now, to be conceived in the womb of a creature of the human race did no harm to my mama, because her soul was immune to every sin. There was no division between her will and the will of her God. The divine currents found no obstacle or opposition in pouring out into her. In every instant she was under the pouring rain of new graces. So with this will and this soul, all holy, all pure, all beautiful, the container of her body, which she received from her mother, remained fragrant, restored, ordered, divinized, in such a way as to be exempt from all the natural troubles by which human nature is invaded. Ah, yes, she was the one who received the seed of the fiat voluntas tua on earth as it is in heaven, and this ennobled her and restored her to her origin, as man was created by us before he sinned. Even more, it made her surpass it. It embellished her even more through the continuous flows of that fiat which has the singular virtue of reproducing images fully similar to the one who created them. And by virtue of the divine will acting in her, one can say that what God is by nature, she is by grace. Our will can do anything and can reach everywhere, when the soul gives us the freedom to act and does not interrupt our work with her own will. End of the reading. The 8th of December 1924, Volume 17, on the Immaculate Conception, how the greatest prodigy was the continuous outpouring of the divine will upon her. I was thinking about and reflecting on the Immaculate Conception of my Sovereign Queen Mama, the qualities, the beauties, and the prodigies of her Immaculate Conception were pouring into my mind. A prodigy that surpasses all other prodigies made by God in all of creation. Now, while I was thinking of this, I said to myself, great is the prodigy of the Immaculate Conception. But my celestial mama had no trial during her conception. Everything was favourable to her, both on the part of God and on the part of her nature, created by God, so happy, so holy, so privileged. So what was her heroism and her trial? If the angel was not exempted from the test, nor was Adam in Eden, was the Queen of all alone to be exempted and not to deserve the most beautiful halo that the trial would place on her august head of Queen and Mother of the Son of God? While I was thinking about this, my adorable Jesus, moving in my interior, told me, my daughter, no one can be acceptable to me without the test. Had there been no test, I would have had a mother slave, not free. And slavery does not enter our relations or our works, nor can it share in our free love. My mama had her first trial from the very first moment of her conception. As soon as she did her first act of reason, she knew her human will on one side and the divine will on the other, and she was left free to adhere to any of those two wills. And without losing one instant, knowing all the intensity of the sacrifice she was making, she gave us her will, without wanting to know it ever again, and we gave her ours as gift. And in this exchange of donation of wills on both sides, poured all the qualities, the beauties, the prodigies, the immensities of grace of the Immaculate Conception of the most privileged of all creatures. It is always the will that I am used to testing. All sacrifices which were directed to me from the human will would nauseate me and would attract not even a glance of mine. But do you want to know what was the greatest prodigy worked by us in this creature so holy, and the greatest heroism of this creature so beautiful, that no one will ever be able to equal? She began her life with our will, and with our will she continued it and fulfilled it. So one can say that she fulfilled it from the moment she started it, and that she started it there where she fulfilled it. And our greatest prodigy was that in each one of her thoughts, words, breaths, heartbeats, movements and steps, our will poured upon her, and she offered us the heroism of a divine and eternal thought, word, heartbeat, breath operating in her. This raised her so high that what we were by nature, she was by grace. All of her other qualities, her privileges, her very Immaculate Conception, would have been nothing compared to this great prodigy. Even more, this is what confirmed her and made her stable and strong during all of her life. My continuous will pouring upon her made her share in the divine nature, and her continuous receiving it rendered her strong in love, strong in sorrow, different from everyone. In this will of ours operating in her, she drew the Word upon earth and the seed of the divine fecundity in order to conceive a man and God without human intervention. And our will made her worthy to be the mother of her own Creator. This is why I keep insisting on the topic of my will, because my will maintains the soul beautiful, just as she came out of our hands, and raises her as the original copy of her Creator. As many great works and sacrifices as one may do, if my will is not in them, I refuse them. I do not recognize them. It is not food for me. and the most beautiful works without my will become food for the human will, for self-esteem, and for the greed of the creature. End of the reading. The 8th of December, 1926, Volume 20. How one who lives in the divine will is the echo and the little sun. How these writings come from the heart of our Lord. The works of our Lord are veils that hide the noble Queen of the divine will. I was doing my usual acts in the eternal volition, and my always lovable Jesus, moving in my interior, told me, "My daughter, you are our echo. As you enter into our will in order to love, to praise, to ask for the coming of our kingdom, we hear in you the echo of our love, the echo of our glory, the echo of our fiat that wants to come upon earth in order to reign, that wants to be prayed and prayed again and pressed to come to reign on earth as it does in heaven." And as you go around through the whole creation to follow the acts of the supreme will in it, we hear your echo in the sea, in the valleys, on the mountains, in the sun, in the heavens, in the stars, in everything. How beautiful is this echo! It is our echo that resounds in all our things. In this echo, we hear the echo of our voice, the motion of our works, the treading of our steps, the motions, the pulsations of our heartbeat, and we greatly delight in seeing your littleness as you, while echoing, try to imitate our voice, to copy the motions of our works, to make the same round as our steps, and to love with our own heartbeat. Then sighing, he added, "My daughter, if the sun had reason and saw a plan to being that wanted to become sun, the sun would increase all of its light, its heat and all of its effects over this being so as to make it become sun. And even though it would not deny its light and its effects to the other beings, because it is in the nature of light to diffuse and to do good to all wherever it is, the fortunate being that received altogether all the reflections and all the goods that the sun contains would become sun. What glory, what contentment would the sun not receive in being able to form another sun? The entire earth for many centuries has never attested to it so much glory, so much love, by receiving its many effects, as this one being that has turned into sun. By living in our fiat, the soul does nothing other than imitate her Creator, and the eternal Sun concentrates all of its reflections upon her in such a way that she becomes the little sun, in the likeness of the divine Sun. Was this not precisely our purpose and our saying, "Let us make man in our image and likeness"? To make him without his having to be like us and carry within himself the image of he who had created him would be neither decorous nor worthy of a work of our hands, nor would it be power of that regenerative breath that came out of our womb to generate a being dissimilar from us. What would be said of a mother who generated not a child who had eyes, mouth, hands, feet, and would be similar to her in all her members, at most smaller than her in all her members, but lacking nothing of all the organs of the mother, but generated a plant, a bird, a stone, things that are dissimilar from her? It would be incredible. Things against nature and unworthy of a mother who was not able to infuse her image and all of her members in her newborn. Now, if all things generate and form things similar to themselves, much more so does God, first generator, whose honour and glory in forming the creature was to form them as similar to himself. Therefore, my daughter, Let your flight in my will be continuous, that it may concentrate its rays upon you, and darting through you, it may make of you its little son. After this, I was feeling as though tired, could not make up my mind to write what my adored Jesus had told me. And Jesus, surprising me to give me will and strength in order to do it, told me, "My daughter, don't you know that these writings of ours come from the depths of my heart, and in them I make flow the tenderness of my heart to touch those who will read them, and the firmness of my divine speech to strengthen them in the truths of my will? In all the sayings, truths, examples that I make you write on paper, I make flow the dignity of my celestial wisdom, in such a way that those who read them or will read them, if they are in grace, will feel within themselves my tenderness, the firmness of my speech, and the light of my wisdom, and as though in between magnets they will be drawn into the knowledge of my will. Those who are not in grace then will not be able to deny that it is light, and light always does good, it never does harm, it illuminates, it warms, it makes one discover the most hidden things and moves one to love them. Who can say he does not receive good from the sun? No one. More than Son, I am issuing these writings from within my heart, that they may do good to all. This is why I have so much interest that you write, because of the great good I want to do to the human family. So much so that I look upon them as my own writings, because it is always I, the one who dictates, and you are the little secretary of the long story of my will. Then I was following in the divine will everything that my sweet Jesus had done while being on earth in his humanity, and I asked in each one of his acts that his fiat be known, and that he come triumphantly to reign in the midst of creatures. And my highest and only good, moving in my interior, told me, "My daughter, just as all creation is veil that hides my will, in the same way my humanity and all of my works, tears and pains, are as many veils that hide my supreme fiat. It reigned in my acts, triumphant and dominating, and it laid the foundations in order to come to reign in the human acts of creatures. But do you know who tears these veils to let it come out to dominate in her own heart? One who recognizes it in each one of my acts and invites it to come out. She tears the veil of my works and she enters into them. She recognizes the noble queen and she prays it. She presses it to no longer remain hidden, and opening her heart to it, she invites it to enter. She tears the veil of my tears, of my blood, of my pains, the veil of the sacraments, the veil of my humanity, and giving her subjection to it, she implores it to no longer remain veiled, but to make itself known as queen, which it is, in order to take its dominion and form the children of its kingdom. From here the necessity that you go around in my volition and in all my works to find the noble queen of our divine will hidden in them, so as to pray it to unveil itself, to come out of its apartments, so that all may know it and let it reign." End of the reading.
All to Jesus I surrender, all to him I freely give. I will ever love and trust him, in his presence
the 8th of December 1927, Volume 23. One who lives in the divine will is regenerated by it and is endowed with its goods. The virgin, little light, became sun by virtue of the divine will. I was doing my round in the whole creation to follow all the acts that the divine fiat exercises in it. But while I was doing this, I thought to myself, I feel I cannot do without going around in the whole creation, as if I could not be without making my tiny little visits to the heavens, to the stars, to the sun, to the sea and all created things, as if an electric wire were pulling me into their midst, to sing the praises of the magnificence of so many works, and to praise and love that divine will that created them, and that holds them tightly as though on the palm of its divine hand, to preserve them beautiful and fresh, just as it issued them into the light of the day, and to ask for that very life and dominion that the divine fiat has within them into the midst of creatures. Why then can I not do without? But while I was thinking of this, my beloved Jesus moved in my interior and told me, my daughter, you must know that you were born not once but twice. The first time like the other creatures. The second time you were regenerated in my will, and since you are a birth from it, all that belongs to it is yours. And just as a father and a mother endow their daughter with their own goods, so did my divine volition, as it regenerated you, endow you with its divine properties. So who does not love? Who does not try to be amidst his properties? Who does not visit them often and form his dwelling in them, in order to enjoy them, love them, and never stop singing the glory of the one who endowed him with so many vast properties that contain so many different beauties? You would be too ungrateful to be daughter of my divine will and not to have your dwelling within the properties of the one who generated you, would be not to love the one who gave you birth with so much love, and not to recognize the riches the one who generated you. So this is the reason for the necessity you feel to go around in the whole creation, because it is your own thing, and the one who generated you calls you with his electric wire of light and of love to enjoy and to love what is his and yours. And he enjoys hearing you repeat your repeated refrains, may the kingdom of your fiat come upon earth. After this, continuing my round in all the things created by God, I paused when he created the sovereign queen, all beautiful, pure and spotless, the new and greatest portent of all creation. And my highest good Jesus added, my daughter, the Immaculate Mary, was the little light of the human stock, because the human earth was her origin. However, she was always daughter of the light, because no stain entered into this light. But do you know where all her greatness is? Who gave her sovereignty? Who formed seas of light, of sanctity, of grace, of love, of beauty, of power, inside and outside of her? My daughter, what is human does not know how to do great things, nor give great things. So the celestial queen would have remained the little light, had she not put her will as though aside, which was the little light, and had she not let herself be invested by my divine will, dissolving her little light in it, which is not little light but endless sun, that investing her completely, formed seas of light around her, of grace, of sanctity, and embellished her so much as to render her all beautiful, with all the shades of the divine beauties, such as to enamour he who had created her. Her Immaculate Conception, though beautiful and pure, was always little light. It would have had neither the power nor sufficient light to be able to form seeds of light and of sanctity, if our divine will had not invested the little light in order to convert it into sun, and if the little light, which was the will of the celestial sovereign lady, had not contented itself with becoming dissolved in the sun of the divine fiat to let itself be dominated by it. This was the great portent, the kingdom of my divine will in her. With it, everything she did became light. She nourished herself with light. Nothing came out of her that was not light, because she had the sun of my divine will in her power, which was such that she could draw from it as much light as she wanted to draw. And since the property of the light is to diffuse itself, to dominate, to fecundate, to illuminate, to warm, this is why the height of the sovereign queen, with the son of my divine will that she possessed, diffused herself in God, and dominating him, she swayed him to descend upon earth. She became fecund of the eternal word. She illuminated and warmed mankind. It can be said that she did everything by virtue of the kingdom of my will that she possessed. All of her other prerogatives can be called ornaments of this mother queen. All the substance of all her goods, of her height, beauty, greatness, and sovereignty was that she possessed the kingdom of my will. So, it is the lesser that is said about her, but not a word spoken of the greater. This means that they know little or nothing about my will, and therefore they are almost all mute for it. End of the reading. The 8th of December 1928, Volume 25. Why all creation celebrated the conception of the Sovereign Queen. How the Virgin awaits her daughters into her seas in order to make of them queens. The Feast of the Immaculate Conception. I was thinking, why did all creation exult with joy and celebrate so much the Immaculate Queen in her Immaculate Conception? And my always lovable Jesus, moving in my interior, told me, "My daughter, do you want to know why? Because the divine will had the beginning of its life in the celestial tiny little girl, and therefore the beginning of all goods in all creatures. There is no good that, in my divine will, does not begin, descend, and ascend into its source. Therefore, since this celestial little girl, from her very immaculate conception, began her life in the divine fiat, and since she was from the human stock, with my will she acquired the divine life, and with her humanity she possessed the human origin. So she had the power to unite the divine and the human, and she gave to God what man had not given to him and had denied to him, which was his will. She gave men the right to be able to ascend to the embraces of her Creator. With the power of our fiat that she had in her power, she bound God and man. So all creation, heaven and earth and even hell, felt in the Immaculate Conception of this virgin little girl just newly born in the womb of her mama, the strength of the order that she was placing in all creation. With my will, she associated herself with all as their sister. She embraced all. She loved everything and everyone. And all longed for her, loved her, and felt honoured to adore the divine will in this privileged creature. How could all creation not celebrate? In fact, up until then, man had been the disorder among all created things. No one had had the courage, the heroism to say to his Creator, "I do not want to know my will. I give it to you as gift. I want your divine will alone as life." But this Holy Virgin gave her will, in order to live of the divine, and therefore all creation felt the happiness of the order that through her was given back to it. And the heavens, the sun, the sea, and everyone competed among themselves to honour she who, by possessing my fiat, gave the kiss of the order to all created things. And my divine volition placed in her hand the sceptre of divine queen and surrounded her forehead with a crown of command, constituting her empress of the whole universe. Then I was feeling as though annihilated within myself. The long privations of my sweet Jesus render me as though lifeless. That burned the little atom of my existence, that being continuously exposed to the burning rays of the sun of the divine fiat, feels all humours being dried up within itself, and while it burns it neither dies nor is it consumed. So I felt not only oppressed, but undone. And my sweet Jesus, as though wanting to cheer me, making himself felt in my interior, giving me a kiss, told me, "My daughter, courage, do not lose heart. On the contrary, I want you to enjoy your happy fortune, that my divine will investing you and darting through you takes away from you all human humours, giving you in exchange humours of divine light. Today is the feast of the Immaculate Conception. Seas of love, of beauty, of power, and of happiness overflowed from the divinity over this celestial creature. And what prevents creatures from being able to enter into these seas is the human will. What we do once, we remain in the continuous act of doing always, without ever ceasing. In the divinity, to give is its nature, with an act that never ends. Therefore these seas are still overflowing, and the divine Queen Mama awaits her daughters, so to let them live in these seas, to make of them as many little queens. However, the human will is not allowed to enter. There is no place for it, and only one who lives of divine will can have access into them. Therefore, my daughter, you can enter into the seas of my Mama whenever you want. My divine will is your guarantor, and with it you will have free step and entrance. Even more, she awaits you, she wants you, and you will render us and her twice as happy because of your happiness. We feel happier in giving, and when the creature does not take our goods, she suffocates within us the happiness that we want to give her. Therefore, I do not want you to be oppressed. Today is the greatest feast, because the divine will had life in the Queen of Heaven. It was the feast of all feasts. It was the first kiss, the first divine embrace that the creature gave to her Creator by virtue of our fiat that the sovereign little girl possessed, the creature sitting at the table with her Creator. Therefore today is also your feast in a special way because of the mission given to you by my divine will. So come into the seas of the Immaculate Queen to enjoy her feast and yours. I felt myself being carried outside of myself into these endless seas, but I lacked the words to express what I experienced. Therefore I stop here and I move on. After this, later in the day, the confessor read in public what is written in the 15th volume about the Immaculate Conception. And my beloved Jesus, in hearing him reading, made feast in my interior and told me, "My daughter, how content I am. Today it can be said that my sovereign Mama receives from the Church the divine honours, as she honours in her, as the first act of her life, the life of the divine will. These are the greatest honours that can be given, that the human will never had life in her, but always, always the divine will. This was the whole secret of her sanctity, of her height, power, beauty, greatness, and so on. It was my fiat that with its heat extinguished the stain of original sin and conceived her immaculate and pure. And my church, instead of honouring my divine will, primary cause and primary act, honoured the effects of it and proclaimed her immaculate, conceived without sin. It can be said that the church gave her human honours, not divine honours, which she justly deserves, because a divine will had continuous life in her. And this was a sorrow for me and for her, because neither did I receive from my church the honours of a divine will dwelling in the Queen of Heaven, nor did she receive the honours due, because she gave within herself the place in which to form the life of the supreme fiat. Therefore, today, by making known that everything in her was the prodigy of my will, and that all of her other prerogatives and privileges were in the secondary order, and as consequence of the effects of that divine will that dominated her, it can be said that today it is with decorum, divine glory, and magnificence that the feast of the Immaculate Conception is celebrated, a feast that more truly can be called the conception of the divine will in the sovereign Queen of Heaven. After this conception was the consequence of everything it is and it did, and of the great prodigies of this celestial little girl. After this, with a more tender emphasis, he added, "My daughter, how beautiful, delightful it was to see this celestial tiny little girl, even from her Immaculate Conception. One would look and would see her little earth taken from the human stock, and inside this little earth one would see the Son of our eternal volition, such that as she was unable to contain it, it overflowed outside of her and extended, filling heaven and earth. We made a prodigy of our omnipotence, so that the little earth of the tiny little Queen might enclose the Son of our divine volition. So one would see earth and sun. Therefore, in everything she did, whether she thought, spoke, worked, or walked, her thoughts were rays of light, her words converted into light, and everything was light that came out of her, because since her little earth was smaller than the immense sea that she enclosed, her acts would get lost within the light. And since this little earth of the celestial sovereign was vivified, animated, and preserved continuously by the Son of my fiat, it appeared always flowery, but with the most beautiful flowerings, that turned into most sweet fruits, such as to draw our divine gazes and make us remain enraptured, but so much that we could not do without looking at her. So great was the beauty and the happiness she gave us. All beautiful was the Immaculate Little Virgin. Her beauty was enchanting and enrapturing. It is enough to say that she was a prodigy of our will, to say everything. Oh, if creatures knew what it means to live of will of God, they would lay down their lives to know it and live in it. End of the reading. The 8th of December, 1931, Volume 30, The Queen of Heaven, withdrawer of the good acts of creatures into her seas of graces, the immutability of God and the mutability of the creature. I continue my abandonment in the divine fiat. Its sweet chains clasp me so tightly, but not so as to take the freedom away from me, no, but to render me more free in the divine fields, and to keep me defended from everyone and from everything, so I feel safer, enchained by the divine will. And while I was doing my acts in it, I felt the need of my celestial Mama, for her to help me and to sustain my little acts, so that they might encounter the divine satisfaction and smile. And the celestial consoler, who is unable to deny me anything when it is about pleasing him, visiting my poor soul, told me, "My daughter, our celestial Mama holds primacy over all the good acts of creatures. She, as Queen, has the mandate and the right to make the withdrawal of all their acts into her acts. Her love of Queen and of Mother is so great that as the creature disposes herself to form her act of love, from the height of her throne she makes a ray of her love descend. She invests and surrounds their act of love to place in them from her own as prime love. And as it is formed, she takes it up within her same ray of love into the fount of her love, and she says to her Creator, "Adorable Majesty, in my love that always springs for you, there is the love of my children fused within my own, that I, with right of Queen, have withdrawn into my sea of love, so that you may find in my own the love of all creatures. If they adore, if they pray, if they repair, if they suffer, from the height of her throne descend the ray of the adoration, the ray of her prayer, the ray of her reparation. She unleashes the vivifying ray from within the sea of her sorrows, and she invests and surrounds the adoration, the prayer, the reparation, the sufferings of creatures. And when they have done and formed the act, the same ray of light takes them up into her throne, and they fuse within the fount of the seas of the adoration, of the prayer, of the reparation, of the sorrows, of the celestial Mama. And she repeats, Majesty most holy, my adoration extends in all the adorations of creatures. My prayer prays in their prayer, repairs with their reparations, and as Mother, my sorrows invest and surround their pains. I will not feel myself Queen if I do not run and place my prime act over all their acts, nor will I enjoy the sweetnesses of Mother if I do not run to surround, help, compensate for, embellish, fortify all the acts of creatures, so that I may be able to say, the acts of my children are one with mine. I hold them in my power before God in order to defend them, help them, and as a sure pledge that they will reach me in heaven. Therefore, my daughter, you are never alone in your acts. You have the celestial Mama with you, who not only surrounds you, but nourishes your act with her light of her virtues to give it life. In fact, you must know that the Sovereign Queen, even from her Immaculate Conception, was the first and only creature who formed the link of connection between the Creator and the creature, broken by Adam. She accepted the divine mandate to bind God and men, and she bound them with her prime acts of fidelity, of sacrifice, of heroism, of making her will die in each of her acts, not once, but always, to make that of God live again. From this sprang forth a fount of divine love that cemented God and man and all their acts. So her acts, her maternal love, her dominion of Queen, are cement that runs that cements the acts of the creatures to render them inseparable from her own, unless someone ungrateful would refuse to receive the cement of the love of his mama. Therefore you must be convinced that around your patience there is the patience of the Queen Mama that surrounds, sustains and nourishes yours. Around your pains her sorrows surround you, sustaining and nourishing like balsamic oil the hardness of your pains. In sum, in everything, she is the Queen, all-doer, who is unable to remain idle upon her throne of glory, but descends, runs as mother into the acts and needs of her children. Therefore thank her for her many maternal cares, and thank God who has given to all generations a mother so holy, lovable, and who loves so much as to reach the point of acting as the withdrawer of all their acts in order to cover them with her own, and to compensate for what is lacking in them of beauty and of goodness. Then I continued my usual round in the created things to follow what the divine will had done in creation, and oh, how beautiful and enchanting it seemed to me. Every time I go around in it, I find surprises that enrapture me, new things that I had not understood before, the ancient and new love of God that never changes. But while my mind wandered within the horizons of creation, my lovable Jesus, surprising me, added, "My little daughter of my will, how beautiful are our works, aren't they? Everything is solidity, perfect balance, immutability, that is not subject to change, nor can it mutate. See then, all creation tells and reveals our divine beauty, our solidity in our works. Our balance is universal in all things, and no matter how many things may happen, whether pleasing or displeasing, our immutability is always at its place of honour. We have changed nothing of the way it was created, and if the creature sees and feels many various changes, she is the one who changes, who mutates at every circumstance. And since this changing is inside and outside of herself, she feels as if our works were changing for her. These are her own changes that surround her, that have the power to move her away from our immutability. Everything is continued and balanced in us. What we did in creation still continues. And since everything was made for those who would live in our will, as the creature places herself in order with it, our creative work carries out its continued act in her, and she feels the life of our immutability, the perfect balance of our works, our love that loves her always without ever ceasing. There where we find our will, we continue the work of our creation, not because our work is interrupted, because our will is not done. No, there is no danger. It is because the purpose for which they were created, which is that of doing our will, is missing in them, and therefore they have no eyes to look at our perfect balance, which is above them, to balance their works and to render them immutable, together with our immutability, nor ears to hear what our works say, nor hands to touch them and receive our continued love that we hold out to them. Therefore they themselves rendered themselves as though estranged from the house of their celestial Father. And our acts continue, do their course, but for them they remain as though suspended and without effects. End of the reading. The 8th of December 1935, Volume 34. Prodigies of the Immaculate Conception. Communication of the Divine Rights. How God does not want to do anything without his celestial mother. I was doing my round in the acts of the divine will, and arrived at the act in which the omnipotent fiat created the Immaculate Virgin. I stopped, and oh, what surprise of prodigies never heard of united together! The enchantment of the sky, of the sun, and of the whole creation could not compare. Oh, how they remained behind the Sovereign Queen. And my sweet Jesus, in seeing me so surprised, told me, "My blessed daughter, you must know that there is no beauty, nor value, nor prodigies that can compare to the Immaculate Conception of this celestial creature. My omnipotent fiat made of her a new creation. Oh, how much more beautiful, more prodigious than the first. My divine volition in itself has neither beginning nor end, and the greatest prodigy was as if in this creature it would be reborn, not once, but in every instant, act and prayer that she did. She grew, and in this growth my will multiplied its prodigies in an infinite way. The creation of the universe was created by us in an admirable way, and it is maintained by us under the empire of our creating and conserving act, without us adding anything else. On the other hand, in this Virgin we maintain the creating, conserving, and growing act. This is the prodigy of prodigies, the life of our volition, reborn in her, and its continuous growth in every act that she did. And our fiat, in order to be born in her, pronounced itself in the act of her conception. And when this pronounces itself, our act has such sumptuousness, sublimity, height, immensity, power, that it takes everything in the net of its love. It does not set anyone aside. Everyone can take the good that our operating fiat possesses, except whoever would not want it. Our divinity, in seeing in this holy creature our will as reborn, shared its divine rights with her, in a way that she was mistress of our love, power, wisdom, and goodness, and queen of our fiat. She, by her growing act of our volition, enraptured us. She loved us so much that she arrived at loving us for everyone. She covered all creatures. She hid them in her love, and she made us feel the echo of the love of everyone and of each one. Oh, how we feel bound, and as if made prisoners by the love of this most holy Virgin, more so because, as she loved us, adored, prayed, operated, with the growing act of our fiat that she possessed, she enclosed her Creator in herself. As she loved us, so we felt absorbed in her without being able to resist her. So much was her power that she dominated us, and she enclosed in herself our sacrosanct Trinity. And how we loved her so much that we let her do what she wanted. Who had the heart to deny her anything? Rather, we felt happier to content her, because a soul who loves us is our happiness, because we feel the echo, the joy of our happiness in her. And one who possesses our will as life is everything for us. This is the great prodigy of the one who possesses our will as life, to feel herself participate in its same divine rights. With this she feels that her love never ends, and she has so much of it that she can love for everyone and give love to everyone. With her growing act it never says enough to her sanctity, more so because the Sovereign Queen, by possessing our will as life, always had something to give us, always something to say. She always kept us occupied, and we always kept giving and always communicating to her our loving secrets. So much so that we do nothing without her. First we feel her there with it, then we deposit it in her maternal heart, and from her heart it descends into the fortunate ones who would receive that good. In fact, there is no grace that descends over the earth, there is no sanctity that is formed, there is no sinner who is converted, there is no love that departs from our throne that is not first deposited in her heart of mother, that forms the maturation of that good, fecundates it with her love, enriches it with her graces, and if necessary with the virtue of her sorrows, and then she deposits it in who must receive it in a way that the one who receives it feels the divine paternity and the maternity of her celestial mother. We can do it without her, but we do not want to. Who will have the heart of setting her aside? Our love, our infinite wisdom, our fiat itself impose over us, and do not let us do anything that does not descend by her means. See, therefore, where our love arrives at for one who lives in the divine will, even to not wanting to do anything without her. She is the harmony of our infinite wisdom, that as the creation of the universe always goes around us, and as they go around fecundating the earth and maintaining the natural life of all creatures, so this new creation of the conception of the Immaculate Lady always goes around God, and God always goes around her. And they maintain the fecundity of good. They form the sanctity of souls and the recall of creatures to God. End of the reading.